We're going to annotate Beowulf, and specifically this first section, the coming of Beowulf, for alliteration, and we're going to analyze how that alliteration affects the mood or creates ideas in the text. So as a reminder, the definition of alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of words. And alliteration is identifiable visually, and what I mean by that is you're looking for a repetition of words that start with the letter C, or a repetition of words that start with the letter B or T, and you can mix them up. It doesn't always have to be the same letter being repeated over and over again, which we'll look at. And it doesn't necessarily have to be words repeated one right after the other. They can be separated by smaller words. Alliteration will help to heighten moods, create musical effects. It also aids in memorization to help people who were passing on Beowulf to remember what to say next and teach it to other people. So we're going to look at, I'm going to read Beowulf out loud, at least the first page, and then we're going to identify alliteration together. After we do the first page together in this screencast, I want you to do the rest of the section of the coming of Beowulf and identify at least 10 more examples of alliteration and make notes on how they affect ideas or moods. The coming of Beowulf. So the living sorrow of Healfdene's son simmered bitter and fresh, and no wisdom or strength could break it. That agony hung on king and people alike, harsh and unending, violent and cruel and evil. In his far-off home, Beowulf, Hygelac's follower and the strongest of the Geats, greater and stronger than anywhere in this world, heard how Grendel filled the nights with horror and quickly commanded a boat fitted out, proclaiming that he'd go to that famous king, would sail across the sea to Hrothgar, now when help is needed. None of the wise ones regretted his going, much as he was loved by the Geats. The omens were good, and they urged the adventure on. So Beowulf chose the mightiest men he could find, the bravest and best of the Geats, 14 in all, and led them down to their boat. He knew the sea would point the prow straight to that distant Danish shore. So, in this first part of the story, we're introduced to Beowulf, and we learn that Beowulf has decided to go to a guy's land. The guy's name is Hrothgar, and Hrothgar is a king. Okay, he's a famous king. And we learn that that famous king and his land has been filled with nights of horror from this monster named Grendel. And Beowulf has decided, because he is the mightiest of all men, right? He greater and stronger than anyone anywhere in this world. We learn that Beowulf has decided that he's going to go and he is going to help Hrothgar and he's going to defeat this monster. And he has to bring with him some men, some warriors, to help him out. And this is where alliteration comes in, because we learn a lot about the characteristics of these men based on the alliteration used. So starting around line 119 or 118. Okay, it says, as he was loved by the Geats, the omens were good, as they urged the adventure on. So Beowulf chose the mightiest men he could find, the bravest and the best of the Geats, 14 in all, and led them down to their boat. He knew the sea would point the prow straight to the distant Danish shore. So we have several examples of alliteration here. Most of them are very close to each other, and especially with these first lines in 120 and 121, we can see that alliteration is being used to point out how brave and mighty and good and strong these men are. So it points out the characteristics of the men. So they're mighty, they're brave, they are the best. And that, overall, for the reader, gives us a mood of perhaps excitement, of hope. It's very positive, right? Because it shows us like, yeah, these people, this kingdom has been in trouble for a really long time, and now these mighty and brave and the best men who could ever be are going to save the kingdom. So we're excited, we're hopeful, we have a positive outlook. And it also shows just how far they're traveling. So he knew the sea would point the prow straight to that distant Danish shore. This is again showing how far they have to travel. But it is still a good feeling because it's pointing, it seems like the sea is pointing their way to good fortune. And the heroes are coming, right? So that's really exciting. And that gives us some very positive and hopeful moods. Okay, let's continue reading together and find some more alliteration. Then they sailed and set their ship out on the waves under the cliffs, ready for what came when they wound through the currents, the sea beating at the sand, and were borne in the lap of their shining ship, lined with gleaming armor, going safely in that oak-hard boat to where their hearts took them. The wind hurried them over the waves, the ship foamed through the sea like a bird, until in the time they had known it would take, standing in the round curled prow, they could see sparkling hills high and green, jutted up over the shore. And rejoicing in those rock-steep cliffs, they quietly ended their voyage. Jumping to the ground, the gates pushed their boat to the sand and tied it in place, mail shirts and armor rattling as they swiftly moored their ship. And then they gave thanks to God for their easy crossing. So, more examples of alliteration. We have a lot of S alliteration here. They sailed, set their ship out on the waves under the cliffs. Ready for what came, they wound through the currents. Cliffs came currents. The seas beating at the sand and were borne in the lap of their shining ship. And this S, safely, this S alliteration repeats itself throughout the entire passage. Mail shirts as they swiftly moored their ship, and then they gave thanks to God. Now, side note, this giving thanks to God right here is one of those examples of Christian influence that sneaks in over time. That probably was not in the original text. But going back to alliteration, we have a lot of S sounds. And I want you to look at specifically what these S alliteration examples are pointing out. Sailed, set their ship, seas, sand, shining ship, safely, ship, sea, standing in the round curled prow, sparkling hills, right? Swiftly moored the ship. So this section provides description of the ship, right? And talks about their journeys. The ship foamed through the sea like a bird, right? The mood, the feeling is confident, right? Based on the description they're giving us, we are confident that they're going to make their way safely by sea in this ship. And they're going to get to where they're going safely. And they're going to be able to set out and accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. And we can point that out. So alliteration helps in two different ways. One, it gives us distinct feelings of mood. So it may be excitement, it could be hope. That could also be violence or anger or calmness. But it also helps with the description and gives us a feeling of, okay, where are they? What chances do they have? Are we rooting for them, or do we think they're going to fail? Whenever you're pointing out alliteration, you really want to focus on what words are being repeated and what descriptions are being repeated to help you figure out what overall mood those words are giving and that passage is giving and how that's affecting the reader. So I want you to go ahead and read the rest of this section on your own. You can stop at the battle with Grendel right here. And I want you to do just like we did on the first page. Highlight as many examples of alliteration as you can and make notes of how they're affecting the overall mood or the feelings of the reader.